You smell the smoke before you see the fire. Torchlight flickers on polished marble, casting shadows too long for the room, until one of them moves. You think you're alone. Then you realize you're being watched, not by a man, but by something colder, older, grief sculpted into power. Before we descend into the madness of Rome's bloodlit palaces, a moment to breathe. Tell us where you're watching from. What corner of the world meets ancient Rome tonight? Like, subscribe, and join this unlikely global gathering drawn together by history's darkest corners. You're not just watching. You're witnessing echoes across millennia. He could not stop looking at the boy. The room was warm with incense and old oil, but Emperor Nero's skin crawled as though touched by ice. His golden eyes, half-lidded, fevered, rimmed red with sleeplessness, locked onto the young freedman being presented to him in a quiet ceremony no one dared to call an audition. The child's name was Sporus, no more than 14. Too thin, mouth like a closed wound, eyes like hers. Pop-Ia. She had been gone 3 months now. 3 months since her swollen belly had cracked open on the marble floor of the Domus Aurea, crushed by his own boot in a burst of rage. And yet here she was again, or something like her. Nero inhaled sharply, swaying in his seat as the scent of spikenard and rose clung to his nostrils. Sporus had been bathed in her perfume. "Come closer," the emperor whispered. No one in the chamber moved. Then, slowly, the boy obeyed. The hem of his tunic grazed the mosaic of Ariadne beneath his feet, and Nero stared until the vision blurred. Poppaea had walked just like that, light-footed and serpentine. His nails dug crescents into the wood of his throne. What does grief become when it's wielded by a man who can command gods and men alike? When mourning has no limits and no laws to restrain it? This was not remembrance. This was resurrection. Within a fortnight, the imperial order had been issued, not in public decree, but in quiet whispers sealed with gold. The boy would be remade. Not educated, not dressed. Altered. He was taken under the cover of dusk. They used wine to numb him, and when that failed, they used force. The room was small. The doctor, a Greek bought for discretion, worked without speaking, his instruments already laid out on cold bronze trays. There were no prayers, no chants, just the wet, tearing noise of flesh unmaking itself. Sporus did not scream until the end. He awoke in silks, unable to move. A eunuch now. But more than that, a placeholder, a proxy, a ghost made flesh. Nero stood beside his bed, fingers trailing over the boy's cheek with a reverence that curdled into something else. "You will be called Sabina," he said, "and you will be loved more wisely this time." The Senate did nothing. The patricians turned their gaze to the floor. Rome, ever hungry for novelty, watched the transformation with morbid awe. What was one more transgression in a city already steeped in divine incest, human torches, and the screams of the Colosseum? And yet this felt different. When Nero married Sporus, Sabina, as he now insisted, the ceremony was complete with bridal veil, dowry, and witnesses. The emperor took the role of husband. Sporus, bruised and pale, was walked through the rites of Roman matrimony as though dragged through a dream. The crown of flowers pressed to his temples still bore traces of blood beneath. One senator was overheard muttering, "It is not a marriage. It is a mirror." But no one dared speak louder. To question Nero's mourning was to question a god's right to reshape the world in his image. Still, behind silk curtains and down dark corridors, whispers festered. Some said Nero believed he could reverse death, that Poppeia's soul had returned to dwell in this boy's reshaped body. Others claimed it was punishment, a cruel irony. Force a child into the skin of a woman he could never become, to eternally act a part that even death had declined. In the public theaters, Nero played the grieving Orpheus, singing into the void for his lost Eurydice. Offstage, he paraded Sporus through festivals and feasts, forcing the court to laugh and toast and flatter. Even their tears had to be performative. "Smile, Sabina," he would say between mouthfuls of pomegranate and peacock. "Let the gods see how joy returns to Rome." But beneath the powder and veil, Sporus never smiled. Only the eyes betrayed him. Glassy, unblinking, always looking beyond the palace walls to a life that had ended the moment the emperor saw someone else in his face. The real Poppaea remained ash in a sealed urn, but her shadow moved through the halls, wearing borrowed flesh. And as Rome clinked goblets and whispered prayers, one question lingered like smoke in the rafters. If a man can raise the dead, what else will he believe he can do? Fade to black. The oil lamps burn low as you step into the hall. Fragrant smoke coils through the air, sweet with myrrh, thick as fog. Strings begin to tremble with the first notes of a wedding hymn, yet every hair on your body stands upright. You are not witnessing love. You are witnessing a ritual of grief, delusion, and domination. Before we descend further into this haunting spectacle, take a moment to join our growing community of history seekers. If you find value in uncovering the darkest corners of the past, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? It's astonishing that across oceans and centuries, we gather here to confront a single, tragic story that still echoes through marble halls, long since fallen to dust. In the spring of 67 AD, Rome prepared for a wedding unlike any the empire had ever seen, or would ever see again. Invitations were issued from the Palatine Hill, sealed with imperial insignia. The guest list included senators, priests, generals, and aristocrats, all summoned not by joy, but by obligation. And at the center of it all stood a bride who was no bride at all. His name was Sporus. But by then it no longer belonged to him. He was clothed in robes designed for a dead woman. The seamstresses had labored for weeks in silence, tailoring the gowns to flatter a surgically altered body, flattened, thinned, and emptied. Fine silks draped his frame, dyed in imperial purple and threaded with gold. Around his neck hung jewelry once worn by Poppaea Sabina, the empress whose beauty had captured Nero's obsession, and whose death had shattered his fragile hold on reality. Now, Nero was remaking her from the raw clay of another human being. The wedding itself took place in the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, Nero's architectural fever dream. Flowers from distant provinces had been shipped in on command. Thousands of oil lamps flickered on polished marble, throwing long, spectral shadows. Musicians played as Sporus was led into the hall, veiled in ivory lace, his face powdered to match the alabaster busts that surrounded him. The crowd rose to their feet, not out of joy, but fear. Fear of what it would mean to look away. The priest began the rites. The emperor extended his hand. "Sabina," he said, "not Sporus." Not once would that name be spoken again. And so, with every legal gesture, every sacred vow, the empire pretended. They pretended this union was holy. They pretended this boy was a woman. They pretended their emperor had not descended into a grief-fueled mania. Because Rome was good at pretending. It had survived on illusion for centuries. After the ceremony, Nero hosted a lavish feast. Sporus sat at his side, eyes cast downward, lips painted crimson. Guests toasted to the couple's health with trembling hands, offered gifts imported from the East, and performed their parts in the grotesque theater of power. No one dared ask the only question that mattered. Who was this for? But the performance did not end with the wedding. Within days, Sporus was moved into quarters once occupied by the real Poppaea. Her statues remained in every room. Her perfume lingered in the drapes. Some say Nero even instructed her handmaids to remain, so the boy wouldn't forget who he was meant to be. Every morning, Sporus woke to the ritual of becoming Sabina. Servants powdered his skin, applied rouge to his cheeks, kohl to his eyes. His hair was curled, pinned, and decorated with ivory combs. Voice tutors arrived mid-morning, instructing him to raise his pitch, to soften the sharp edges of his consonants. A woman, they whispered, never lets her voice cut the air. She lets it drift. Then came the walking lessons. He was taught to glide, not step, to sit with ankles crossed, to hold his hands like porcelain, never clenched. Day after day, gesture by gesture, Sporus was trained not just to mimic a woman, but to unlearn himself. The cruelty wasn't in the spectacle. It was in the stillness, in the long hours spent alone in a chamber that was both shrine and prison, in the mirrors that reflected someone else's face, in the court banquets where Nero would drunkenly tell stories about his wife, reminiscing about events she had never lived, while Sporus smiled on cue and answered to a name that was not his. No one came to save him. No one spoke up. To do so was to invite the same fate, or worse. The senators bowed. The poets wrote flattering verses. The guards watched in silence, and the boy who had once been a palace page now wore the crown of a ghost. He was presented at festivals, displayed at games, paraded in the imperial litter. Foreign dignitaries were introduced to the empress, and though many recognized the fiction, none dared question it. For Nero, the illusion had become truth. The line between grief and madness had vanished, and Sporus was trapped in the space between. The Roman court was now a theater where everyone played their role. To falter, to forget one's line, was to vanish. The stakes were not political. They were existential. And through it all, Sporus remained silent. Whether he wept in private, whether he dreamed of escape, whether he clung to scraps of his old self, we'll never know. History records his image, but not his voice. His silence was his survival. Yet even survival has a cost. This was no marriage. It was a mausoleum with music, a coronation of absence, a daily resurrection of the dead, carried out on the living body of a boy who had no say in what he had become. And outside the palace, the empire simmered. The fires that had once burned in Nero's heart were now beginning to ignite across his domains. Revolts whispered from the provinces. Legions shifted in their loyalties. And the people who had clapped at the emperor's performances were beginning to look for a new stage. But inside the golden house, the oil lamps still burned. And Sporus, the empress who never was, stood beside the emperor, an ornament of grief, a breathing lie, and the most beautiful illusion in an empire crumbling beneath its own weight. The mask was still in place, but the cracks were beginning to show. The perfume clings to you. No matter how many times you bathe, it seeps into your skin, a scent that isn't yours, but was pressed into you like a second soul. You walk into torchlight and the crowd doesn't see a man. They see the echo of someone else's madness, wrapped in silk, crowned in mockery. If you're here, watching this now, thank you. Speak up in the comments. What city, what country are you watching from? How did you come to Sporus's story? Every time someone across the world remembers him, history cracks open just a little. Like, subscribe and join us. Let's keep the forgotten from vanishing again. It was not over when Nero died. Rome burned again, not in flame, but in chaos. His suicide had left a void no one man could fill, and so many tried. Generals tore the empire like carrion, each hungry for a crown still slick with blood. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, the year of 4 emperors, and through it all, Sporus. He had survived Nero's death not as a person, but as a possession, a relic, passed from bedchamber to war tent, from villa to villa, as generals vied for legitimacy. None could boast imperial blood, but all could hold the boy Nero had once married. He was made into proof, a living artifact of divinity. When Vitellius took Rome, he took Sporus too. The emperor was not mad like Nero, nor mournful. His cruelty was blunt, unimaginative, and bored. He saw in Sporus not a lost empress, but a weapon. something both grotesque and exquisite, something the crowd would never look away from. "It will be a spectacle," Vitellius muttered one evening, slicing roasted fig with his dagger. "Like the myths of old. Let the people see their legends bleed." He ordered a performance for the Colosseum, a mock rape of Persephone by Pluto, with Sporus in the role of the goddess. No mask, no veil, just the boy, now 20, cloaked in bridal white again, waiting to be dragged into the underworld one final time, this time for laughs, for cheers, for Rome's unquenchable thirst for theater laced with real agony. Sporus said nothing when the order was read aloud, but his fingers twitched. For days he did not eat, did not sleep. He stared at the gold leaf peeling from his chamber walls, tracing its flaking edges like someone trying to remember what life was before the paint. He had never been asked what he wanted, not when he was taken, not when he was cut, not when he was veiled or named or married or handed off like spoils of war. But now, with nothing left but humiliation, Sporus chose. In the quiet dark before the morning of the performance, he opened a small vial of poison, possibly smuggled by a sympathetic servant, perhaps bartered for with the only coin he had: his silence. No one knows what it tasted like. Some say it was bitter, others say perfumed. What matters is that he drank it. He died quietly. No screaming, no audience, no applause. Just a body in a room still dressed for theater, lips purple, robe white, like a statue waiting for a sculptor who never came. Vitellius raged, of course. Rome lost its show, but the boy was beyond reach now. For the first time, Sporus had done something not for an emperor, not for a mob, not for memory, but for himself. And then, like so many who never got to speak their own story, he vanished. No tomb, no monument, no inscription on Roman stone. The record skips, and Sporus becomes a footnote, a curiosity in the margins of men's histories. But listen closer. You can hear him in every silence where empire failed to speak a name. You can feel him in every museum label that calls a life unknown. His body may have been erased, but his ghost lingers, in marble eyes that refuse to blink, in veils worn by those who never wanted ceremony, in the perfume of a person who never got to be one. Because the truth is this: empires do not simply conquer land. They conquer identity. They reshape you, rename you, rewrite you, until even your pain belongs to them. But Sporus, in the end, wrote one sentence they could not delete. He said no. And that single word, whispered in poison, still echoes beneath the marble domes and broken columns of a world built on beautiful lies. The question remains, hanging in the dust where his name once might have been carved: how many more walked into the torchlight wearing someone else's shadow?